We build our lives like houses. We lay a foundation of trust, erect walls of routine, and decorate the rooms with shared memories and future dreams. From the outside, these homes can look perfect, impenetrable fortresses of domestic bliss. But what happens when a poison seeps into the foundation? When a crack appears in the wall, not from the outside, but from within? What happens when the person you promised to love, honor, and cherish becomes the obstacle to a new, forbidden desire? Tonight, we take you inside one of these perfect houses, in a quiet, tree-lined suburb where nothing bad is ever supposed to happen. We'll introduce you to a husband, a wife, and a lover, a triangle of passion, deceit, and ultimately, unimaginable violence that ended in a bloody scene on a polished hardwood floor. This is a story of domestic horror, a cautionary tale about the secrets we keep and the deadly consequences they can unleash. This story is a complex and disturbing look at the human heart. If you find these deep dives into the psychology of crime compelling, and you want to ensure you don't miss future investigations, take a moment now to subscribe to our channel and click the notification bell. Your support is what allows us to continue telling these vital stories. Now, lock your doors and settle in, as we explore the case of Mark Turner, a man who thought he had it all, never realizing the two people he trusted most were architecting his demise. The Turner residence at 17 Willow Lane was the envy of the Maple Creek community. It was a meticulously restored colonial-style house, painted a tasteful slate gray with crisp white trim. In the spring, vibrant azaleas bloomed along the stone walkway, and in the autumn, a magnificent Japanese maple in the front yard set the lawn ablaze in fiery shades of crimson and gold. The house, much like the family who lived inside it, projected an image of effortless perfection. It was a tangible symbol of the American dream, beautifully realized. Mark Turner was the architect of that dream, both literally and figuratively. At 42, he was a partner at a prestigious downtown architectural firm, known for his sleek, modernist designs that were both innovative and commercially successful. He was handsome in a conventional, reliable way, with a strong jaw, neatly trimmed brown hair just starting to show whispers of silver at the temples, and a smile that could put clients at ease and secure multi-million-dollar contracts. He was a good provider, a pillar of the community, and by all outward appearances, a devoted husband and father to two bright, happy children, 8-year-old Lily and 6-year-old Sam. He worked long hours, driven by a relentless ambition to give his family everything he never had. The house on Willow Lane, the European vacations, the private school tuition, these were the bricks and mortar of his love, the tangible evidence of his success and his devotion. His wife, Eleanor, known to everyone as Ellie, was the heart of the home. At 38, she was striking, with a cascade of honey-blonde hair, expressive blue eyes, and a figure she maintained with a disciplined regimen of yoga and spin classes. She had given up a promising career in gallery curation to raise the children, a decision she had once embraced but now privately questioned in the long, silent hours after the kids were in bed and Mark was still at the office. She was the consummate suburban mother, president of the PTA, a volunteer at the local animal shelter, and the host of dinner parties that were the talk of their social circle. Her life was a carefully curated collection of beautiful moments, perfectly staged and shared on social media, each post garnering a chorus of likes and comments praising her seemingly perfect existence. But behind the filtered images and the perfectly manicured lawn, the foundation of the house on Willow Lane was beginning to crack. The silence between Mark and Ellie had grown cavernous. Their conversations had become transactional, a series of logistical exchanges about schedules, bills, and the children's activities. The passion that had once defined their relationship had cooled to a polite, roommate-like affection. Mark, consumed by his work, saw the beautiful life he provided as the ultimate expression of his love. He failed to see the loneliness in Ellie's eyes, the way she would stare out the kitchen window into the distance, a look of profound, unspoken longing on her face. He was so busy designing buildings for others that he had neglected the crumbling architecture of his own marriage. Ellie felt invisible. She was a ghost in her own beautiful home, her identity subsumed by her roles as Mark's wife and Lily and Sam's mom. The gratitude she once felt for the life Mark had given her had curdled into a quiet resentment. His long hours felt less like a sacrifice for the family and more like an escape from it. His exhaustion at the end of the day left no room for her thoughts, her desires, her fears. She was drowning in a sea of material comfort, and no one seemed to notice. The catalyst for change, the stone thrown into the still, stagnant waters of her life, was a man named Liam Ryder. Ellie met him at Synergy, the exclusive fitness club where she spent her mornings toning her body and quieting her mind. Liam was a personal trainer there, but he was more than that. He was an artist, a sculptor who worked with reclaimed metal, and his body was a testament to his craft, lean, powerful, and covered in intricate tattoos that peeked out from the sleeves of his t-shirt. He was everything Mark was not: spontaneous, intense, and emotionally present. He had a way of looking at Ellie, a deep, penetrating gaze that made her feel not just seen, but truly understood. Their interactions started innocently enough. A casual conversation about form during a yoga class. A shared laugh over a spilled smoothie at the juice bar. Liam began to seek her out, asking about her day, about her past as a gallery curator, a part of her she thought she had buried long ago. He listened, truly listened, with an intensity that was both flattering and intoxicating. He saw past the perfect wife and mother and saw Eleanor, the passionate, intelligent woman who was still there, dormant but not dead. The harmless conversations soon evolved into harmless coffees after her workouts. They would sit for hours in a quiet corner of a local cafe, talking about art, about life, about their dreams and disappointments. Ellie found herself opening up to him in ways she hadn't with anyone in years, not even Mark. She told him about her feelings of emptiness, of being trapped in a gilded cage. Liam didn't offer platitudes or easy solutions. He validated her feelings. He told her she deserved to be happy, to be fulfilled, to be desired. He made her feel alive. The emotional affair was a slow, seductive burn, a secret garden she tended with exhilarating care. The lies to Mark began as small omissions, a coffee date described as a trip to the grocery store, an extra hour at the gym attributed to a new, demanding class. But the deception grew with the intensity of her feelings. The secret texts, filled with a passion and intimacy she no longer shared with her husband, became her lifeline. Her phone, once a tool for managing her family's schedule, was now a portal to a secret world, a world where she was the center of someone's universe. The inevitable happened on a rainy Tuesday afternoon. Mark was on a business trip in Chicago. The kids were at a playdate. Liam had texted her, "My studio. I have something to show you." His studio was a cavernous, messy space in a converted warehouse on the industrial side of town. It smelled of sawdust, welding fumes, and oil paint. It was a world away from the sterile perfection of her life on Willow Lane. And in the center of the room was a sculpture, a twisted, beautiful form of rusted steel and polished copper. He told her he had made it for her, that it was called Uncaged. In that moment, standing in the rain-streaked light of the studio, looking at a piece of art inspired by her deepest feelings, the last of her resistance crumbled. The emotional affair became a physical one. It was everything her life with Mark was not: raw, passionate, and utterly consuming. With Liam, she felt a sense of freedom, a shedding of the skin of the perfect wife she had worn for so long. The affair became her addiction. The risk, the secrecy, the stolen moments in cheap motel rooms, and the back of Liam's beat-up pickup truck. It was a powerful, dangerous drug. But it was also a source of constant, gnawing anxiety. The fear of being caught was a constant shadow, a dark counterpoint to the exhilarating brightness of her newfound passion. She became a master of deception, her life a complex web of lies and alibis. Mark was not an idiot. He was an architect, a man who noticed details, who understood that when a structure shows signs of stress, it's because there's a fundamental problem with the foundation. He noticed the small changes in Ellie, the way she guarded her phone, the vague, unsubstantiated stories about her afternoons, the new, unfamiliar glow in her eyes that was not for him. He felt a growing distance between them, a coldness that had nothing to do with their usual marital fatigue. He began to ask questions, not accusatory, but probing. Who were you texting? You've been spending a lot of time at the gym lately. Each question was a small prick of a needle, threatening to pop the fragile bubble of her secret world. Ellie would react with a carefully calibrated defensiveness, turning his suspicions back on him. Why are you checking up on me? Don't you trust me? I'm finally doing something for myself, and you can't be happy for me? She made him feel guilty for his own intuition, a classic tactic of the unfaithful. The tension in the house on Willow Lane became thick and suffocating. The beautiful rooms, once filled with the laughter of their children, now seemed to echo with unspoken accusations. Mark's suspicion grew into a quiet, simmering certainty. He didn't have proof, but he knew. He knew he was losing her. One evening, Mark came home early, hoping to surprise Ellie and the kids. He found the house empty. A quick call to her friend confirmed that the book club meeting she had claimed to be at was not scheduled for that night. He sat in the darkened living room, the silence of the house pressing in on him. He felt a profound sense of failure, a hollow ache in his chest. He didn't know how to fix it, how to get his wife back. When Ellie finally came home, her hair slightly disheveled, her cheeks flushed, she froze in the doorway when she saw him. The lie died on her lips. In that moment, the unspoken truth hung between them, undeniable and devastating. The confrontation was not loud or violent. It was quiet, brutal, and heartbreaking. Mark laid out his suspicions, his voice heavy with a pain that was deeper than anger. Ellie, trapped and with no more lies to tell, did not confess, but she did not deny it either. Her silence was its own confession. The days that followed were a cold war fought in the trenches of their beautiful home. They spoke only when necessary, their words clipped and devoid of emotion. They put on a brave face for the children, but Lily and Sam were not fooled. They could feel the icy chill that had descended upon their home. Ellie was torn. A part of her was racked with guilt over the pain she was causing her family. But another, more powerful part of her would not give up Liam. He was her escape, her future. The thought of going back to the empty silence of her life with Mark was unbearable. She poured out her turmoil to Liam during one of their clandestine meetings. She told him about the confrontation, about the Cold War in her home, about her fear and her confusion. Liam listened, his expression a mask of empathy. But underneath the concern, a darker, more calculating thought was taking shape. He held her, stroking her hair. "He'll never let you go, Ellie," he said, his voice a low, hypnotic whisper. "A man like him, a man who sees you as a possession, an accessory to his perfect life. He won't just let you walk away." "I don't know what to do," she sobbed. "I can't live like this." Liam pulled back, looking deep into her eyes. His gaze was intense, unwavering. "What if you didn't have to?" he said, the words hanging in the air, heavy with a terrible, unspoken meaning. "What if there was a way for you to be free, for us to be together, without him standing in the way?" Ellie stared at him, her heart pounding. She knew what he was suggesting. The thought was monstrous, unthinkable. But it was also a seed, a tiny, poisonous seed planted in the fertile ground of her desperation. She tried to push it away, to recoil in horror. But the seed had taken root. The affair had been a crack in the mirror of her perfect life. But this was a suggestion that would shatter the glass entirely. As she drove back to the house on Willow Lane, the house that now felt more like a prison than a home, the monstrous what if echoed in her mind. For the first time, Ellie Turner didn't just want to escape her husband. She began to contemplate erasing him. The seed Liam had planted in Ellie's mind grew with terrifying speed, its roots and vines twisting around her conscience, choking out the last vestiges of reason and morality. The idea of Mark simply being gone, not through a messy divorce, but permanently transformed from an unthinkable horror into a dark, seductive fantasy. Liam nurtured this fantasy, cultivating it with the skill of a master gardener tending to a toxic bloom. He was no longer just a lover. He had become her co-conspirator, the architect of a new, far more sinister design. Their secret meetings took on a new, feverish intensity. The passionate embraces were now interspersed with whispered conversations about the problem and the solution. Liam was methodical, a chilling counterpoint to Ellie's emotional turmoil. He framed the idea not as murder, but as an act of liberation, of self-preservation. He skillfully manipulated her feelings of being trapped, twisting Mark's quiet desperation into a portrait of a controlling, emotionally abusive husband who would stop at nothing to keep her imprisoned in her gilded cage. "Think about it, Ellie," he would say, his voice a low, persuasive hum. "A divorce would be a war. He'd use the kids against you. He'd drain you financially. He's a powerful man. He would destroy you. Is that the future you want? A future of courtrooms and custody battles? Of seeing your children only on weekends? Or do you want a future with me? A future where you are finally free?" He painted a picture of a life together, a life of passion, art, and freedom, a life that could only be built on the ashes of her old one. Ellie, emotionally vulnerable and desperate for the future he described, began to believe him. She allowed herself to see Mark not as the father of her children, the man she had once loved, but as an obstacle, a roadblock on her path to happiness. The guilt was still there, a cold, heavy stone in her stomach, but it was being overshadowed by a potent cocktail of fear and desire. The planning began in earnest. It was Liam who orchestrated the details, his mind surprisingly adept at a kind of cold criminal logic. He insisted on a plan that would deflect suspicion, something that would look like a tragic accident or a random act of violence. They settled on the idea of a home invasion, a robbery gone wrong. It was a classic, almost cliché scenario, but its familiarity was its strength. It was a story the police and the community would readily believe. Maple Creek, for all its affluence, was not immune to the crime that occasionally bled over from the city. Liam laid out the blueprint. They would need to make it look authentic. A smashed window, ransacked drawers, a few valuable but non-sentimental items stolen. The most crucial element, he explained, was Ellie's role. She would have to be the grieving widow, the hysterical victim who discovers the horrific scene. Her performance would be the linchpin of their entire deception. And then there was the question of the act itself. Who would do it? Liam was clear. They had to do it themselves. Bringing in a third party was too risky, another loose end that could unravel their story. He assured her that he would handle the physical part. All she had to do was let him in the house and play her part. The weapon of choice was decided upon with a chilling pragmatism. A gun was too loud, too traceable. A poison was too complex, too easy to detect in an autopsy. They settled on a knife. It was quiet, intimate, and brutal. And to further sell the robbery gone wrong narrative, the knife would come from the Turner's own kitchen, a high-end Wusthof chef's knife from the butcher block on the granite countertop. The burglar, they would claim, must have grabbed it in the heat of the moment. The days leading up to the chosen night were a surreal, waking nightmare for Ellie. She moved through her life like an automaton, her mind a maelstrom of fear, guilt, and a strange, terrifying resolve. She would watch Mark playing with Lily and Sam in the backyard, a lump forming in her throat so tight she could barely breathe. She would see the exhaustion and sadness in his eyes, and a wave of pity would wash over her. But then she would receive a text from Liam, "Stay strong. Think of our future." And the resolve would harden once more. She was living a double life in the most extreme sense, the loving mother and the plotting murderer existing in the same skin. They chose a Thursday night. Mark had a late meeting and wouldn't be home until after 10. The kids would be sound asleep. The plan was meticulously rehearsed in whispered phone calls and coded text messages. Ellie was to make sure the back patio door was unlocked. At 11 o'clock, Liam would slip into the house. He would be wearing gloves and a ski mask. He would go upstairs to the master bedroom, where Mark would be sleeping. Ellie, meanwhile, would be in the guest room, having claimed she couldn't sleep and didn't want to disturb Mark. This would serve two purposes. It would remove her from the immediate scene of the crime, and it would lend credibility to her story of hearing a commotion and hiding in fear. After Liam was finished, he would stage the robbery and slip back out into the night. Ellie was to wait for 20 minutes, then discover her husband's body and make a frantic, hysterical 911 call. On the appointed Thursday, a heavy, oppressive stillness seemed to settle over the house on Willow Lane. Every sound was magnified. Every shadow seemed to hold a sinister shape. Ellie went through the evening's routine in a daze. She helped the kids with their homework, her hand trembling slightly as she pointed to a math problem. She read them their bedtime stories, her voice catching in her throat as she kissed their foreheads. The simple, domestic acts were imbued with a terrible, tragic finality. Mark came home at 10:15, looking tired but carrying a small bouquet of freesias, Ellie's favorite. "I'm sorry I've been so distant lately," he said, his voice soft, his eyes filled with a weary sincerity. "I know things have been hard. I want to fix this. I want to fix us." The flowers, the apology, the look in his eyes was a direct hit to Ellie's already fractured conscience. For a moment, she wavered. She could call it off. She could tell him to leave, to confess, to do anything but this. But the moment passed. She took the flowers, her hands shaking. "Thank you, Mark," she whispered. "They're beautiful." He went upstairs to shower, and Ellie walked to the back patio door. Her reflection in the dark glass was a stranger, a pale, haunted woman with wide, terrified eyes. With a deep, shuddering breath, she reached down and turned the lock, leaving the door slightly ajar. The click of the mechanism was the loudest sound she had ever heard. She went to the guest room and lay on the bed, fully clothed, her heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. She stared at the ceiling, every nerve in her body screaming. The minutes crawled by, each tick of the clock a footstep marching towards an irrevocable act. At exactly 11, Oat seemed to hear a faint creak from the downstairs floor. He was in the house. The silence that followed was even more terrifying. Her imagination ran wild, painting a vivid, horrific picture of what was happening in the master bedroom just down the hall. She squeezed her eyes shut, pressing her hands over her ears, but she couldn't block out the phantom sounds, the imagined struggle, the final, desperate gasp for air. Then she heard it, a real sound this time, a dull, heavy thud. It was the sound of a body hitting the floor. A wave of nausea washed over her, and she choked back a sob. This was real. This was happening. There was no going back. She lay there, paralyzed, for what felt like an eternity. She could hear faint, muffled noises from downstairs, the sound of a drawer being pulled open, the clatter of silverware. Liam was staging the scene. He was erasing their crime and creating a new, false one in its place. Then silence again. A deep, profound silence that was more terrifying than any noise. He was gone. Now it was her turn, her part to play. She looked at the clock. 11:30. She had to wait another 10 minutes. The 10 longest minutes of her life. She practiced the scream in her head, the frantic, panicked words she would say to the 911 operator. She was no longer just Eleanor Turner. She was an actress, about to give the performance of her life, a performance that would determine the course of her entire future. At 11:40, she took a deep breath, stood up on shaky legs, and walked out of the guest room. The hallway was dark. The door to the master bedroom was slightly ajar. A sliver of light from the bedside lamp spilled out onto the carpet. She pushed the door open. The scene that greeted her was one of pure, unadulterated horror, a tableau of domestic violence that would be seared into her memory forever. The room was in disarray, drawers pulled out, clothes strewn on the floor. And there, lying face down in a rapidly expanding pool of dark, crimson blood, was her husband. The Wusthof chef's knife, its silver blade stained red, was still protruding from his back. The sight was so horrific, so much more real and brutal than she had ever imagined, that the scream that tore from her throat was not an act. It was a raw, primal cry of genuine terror. The monster she had unleashed was real. With trembling fingers, she pulled out her phone and dialed 911. Her voice, when she spoke to the operator, was a choked, hysterical sob. "My husband! Oh God, my husband!" she cried, the words tumbling out between gasps. "There's been a break-in. He's hurt. He's not breathing. Please hurry." She had followed the blueprint. She had played her part. But as she stood there, staring at the body of the man she had murdered, the father of her children, she was struck by a terrifying realization. The freedom she had craved, the new life she had dreamed of, was already a ghost. The house on Willow Lane was no longer a prison of quiet desperation. It was now a crime scene, a tomb, and she was forever bound to the horror that had unfolded within its walls. The foundation of her life had not just cracked. It had been dynamited, and she was standing alone in the rubble. The first police car arrived just minutes later, its flashing red and blue lights washing over the perfect facade of the house, signaling that the private horror of Willow Lane was about to become a very public spectacle. The arrival of the Maple Creek Police Department shattered the pre-dawn stillness of Willow Lane. Neighbors, drawn from their beds by the flashing lights and the urgent squawk of police radios, gathered in hushed, fearful groups on their perfect lawns, their comfortable sense of suburban security evaporating in the cool night air. Inside number 17, the scene was one of controlled chaos. Uniformed officers secured the perimeter while forensic technicians in white coveralls moved with quiet, methodical precision, their cameras flashing, their dusting powders and evidence markers transforming the beautiful home into a sterile, numbered grid. Ellie, wrapped in a coarse police blanket, sat on the sofa in the living room, her body racked with tremors she didn't have to feign. She gave her preliminary statement to a young, sympathetic patrol officer, her words punctuated by sobs and shudders. She recounted the rehearsed story. She couldn't sleep, went to the guest room, heard a noise, hid in the closet, and then, after a terrifying silence, emerged to find the most horrific scene imaginable. It was a flawless performance, a portrait of a traumatized, grieving widow. But the illusion began to fray with the arrival of Detective Isabella Rossi. Rossi was a veteran homicide detective in her late 40s, with sharp, intelligent eyes that missed nothing and a calm, unreadable demeanor that could unnerve the most hardened criminals. She had seen hundreds of crime scenes, and she had developed a sixth sense for deception, for the small, discordant notes in a story that hinted at a deeper, hidden truth. As she walked through the Turner house, Rossi's internal alarms began to sound. The scene was, in a word, too perfect. The ransacked drawers looked staged, the items tossed about with a theatrical carelessness. A valuable laptop sat on the desk in plain sight, untouched. A pearl necklace lay on the dresser, ignored. The burglar had stolen a mid-range television and a few pieces of silver, but had left behind items of far greater value. It didn't feel like a robbery. It felt like a pantomime of one. The point of entry that unlocked patio door was another red flag. There were no signs of forced entry, no pry marks on the frame, no shattered glass. It suggested a level of carelessness that seemed out of character for the meticulous, security-conscious world of Maple Creek. But it was Ellie herself who raised the biggest questions in Rossi's mind. While her grief seemed genuine enough on the surface, there was a subtle, underlying current of control, of performance. Her answers to Rossi's gentle but probing questions were a little too detailed, a little too linear for someone who had just undergone a profound trauma. And in the depths of her blue eyes, behind the tears, Rossi saw not just grief, but a flicker of something else, fear. But it wasn't the fear of a random intruder. It was the fear of being caught. The investigation began to move at a rapid pace. Rossi and her team started by digging into the victims' lives, peeling back the layers of the Turners' seemingly perfect marriage. It didn't take long to find the cracks. Interviews with friends and neighbors painted a picture of a relationship under strain, of a couple that had grown distant. Several of Ellie's friends admitted, reluctantly, that she had seemed unhappy, that she had spoken of feeling trapped and unfulfilled. The true breakthrough, however, came from the place it so often does in modern investigations: the digital world. The forensic tech unit pulled the data from Ellie's and Mark's cell phones. Mark's phone was unremarkable, filled with work emails and family photos. But Ellie's phone was a treasure trove of deception. Even though she had deleted the incriminating texts, the tech unit was able to recover fragments from the phone's memory. The fragments were enough to reveal a secret, passionate correspondence with a contact saved under the name L. A quick check of cell tower records for the previous few months revealed a pattern. Ellie's phone and L's phone were frequently in the same location at the same time, often in areas far from her usual haunts: a nondescript motel off the interstate, a secluded park on the edge of town, and the industrial warehouse district. The final piece of the puzzle clicked into place when they ran the phone number for L. It was registered to one Liam Ryder, a personal trainer at the Synergy Fitness Club, and a local artist with a minor police record for a bar fight years ago. Detective Rossi now had her motive. This wasn't a robbery gone wrong. This was a crime of passion, a classic love triangle that had escalated to murder. Rossi brought Liam Ryder in for questioning first. He swaggered into the interrogation room with a confident, almost arrogant air. He denied everything. He claimed he and Ellie were just friends, that he was a mentor to her, helping her reconnect with her passion for art. He had an alibi for the time of the murder, was home, alone, working on a sculpture. It was a weak alibi, but he delivered it with a convincing, easy charm. But his composure began to crack when Rossi laid out the evidence. The recovered text messages, the cell tower data that placed him near the Turner house on the night of the murder, the security camera footage from a neighboring property that showed a pickup truck matching his description driving away from Willow Lane at 11:15 p.m. Liam's charming facade crumbled, replaced by a sullen, cornered animal aggression. He demanded a lawyer, and the interview was over. Next, it was Ellie's turn. Rossi had her brought to the station directly from her parents' home, where she had been staying with the children. When Ellie walked into the same interrogation room Liam had just vacated, her composure was gone. She was pale, exhausted, and visibly terrified. Rossi didn't use aggression. She used a quiet, almost maternal empathy. She spoke of the evidence not as an accusation, but as a series of established facts. She talked about the children, about the terrible future they faced, losing one parent to violence and the other to prison. "We know about Liam, Ellie," Rossi said, her voice soft but firm. "We know about the affair. We know he was there that night. The lies are over. The only thing you have left to decide is who you are in this story. Are you a cold-blooded killer? Or are you a woman who was manipulated, who was pushed into something terrible by a man who preyed on your unhappiness?" She was offering Ellie a lifeline, a narrative where she was not the villain, but a victim. It was a classic interrogation technique, and for a woman as emotionally broken as Ellie, it was devastatingly effective. Ellie's carefully constructed wall of denial shattered into a million pieces. The sobs that escaped her were no longer part of a performance. They were the raw, agonizing sounds of a soul in torment. Through her tears, the whole story came pouring out: the affair, the feelings of being trapped, Liam's manipulation, the blueprint for murder, the unlocked door, the terrible, bloody aftermath. She confessed to everything, her confession a desperate, futile attempt to purge the poison from her system. The trial of Eleanor Turner and Liam Ryder was a media sensation. It was a story that had everything: sex, betrayal, and murder in the idyllic suburbs. The courtroom was a theater, and the nation was a captivated audience. The prosecution, led by a sharp, relentless DA, laid out the case with chilling precision. They presented the cell phone data, the confessions, and the forensic evidence that directly contradicted the home invasion story. Friends testified about the failing marriage. Liam's ex-girlfriends testified to his manipulative and controlling nature. Liam's defense tried to pin the entire murder on Ellie, portraying him as an unwilling pawn in the scheme of a manipulative, sociopathic housewife. Ellie's defense, in turn, used the argument Detective Rossi had offered her: that she was a victim of psychological abuse, a woman brainwashed by a predatory lover. But the jury saw through the lies and the manipulations. They saw two selfish, narcissistic individuals who had decided that a human life was a fair price to pay for their own happiness. The evidence was simply too overwhelming. The verdict came after only 6 hours of deliberation. Guilty, on all counts. First-degree murder. Conspiracy to commit murder. As the verdict was read, Ellie collapsed into her chair, her face ashen. The future she had killed for, the life of freedom and passion with Liam, had been a mirage. Her reality was now a concrete cell. Liam, ever defiant, stared straight ahead, a contemptuous sneer on his face. He showed no remorse, no flicker of emotion. The house on Willow Lane was sold, its new owners unaware of the dark history that stained its polished floors. Lily and Sam went to live with Ellie's parents, their young lives irrevocably broken, forever marked as the children whose mother had conspired with her lover to murder their father. In the end, the story of the house on Willow Lane became a grim local legend, a cautionary tale whispered at dinner parties and community gatherings. It was a story about how the most beautiful facades can hide the most horrifying secrets, and how a desperate search for a new life can sometimes lead to the destruction of many. For Eleanor Turner, the gilded cage she had so desperately wanted to escape had simply been replaced by a much smaller, colder, and more permanent one.